In China, where the coronavirus outbreak started, the number of deaths has now passed the 1,000.
He diagnosed me with having multiple sclerosis.
So, what about a cure for multiple sclerosis?
It attacked the vaccine, but then it didn't switch off.
Every part of the United Kingdom is now in lockdown.
This has been quite a sudden turn of events for me.
I was against HSCT at first. You need to do something quickly. You've probably got 18 months to 2 years. If you don't do it in that time, you will have gone too far.
Right, whenever you're ready.
Ready? Should we go? Let's go. So my name is Victoria Saunders, and I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. It'll be 3 years ago next month. I'm 55 now. But this has been quite a sudden turn of events for me, as I had no prior medical implications before.
My name is Dee Saunders. I'm Victoria's mum. I am 79. I've done various jobs in the past, but I worked in the NHS for 15 years. I hated it at first and then began to love it. She was my firstborn. She was easy baby, very easy. Slept all the time, didn't do anything naughty, was very sociable. And she was a lovely child, and then she hit 13. And that's a different story.
My first symptoms started in summer 21. I started falling over a lot. Things were just happening, but I put it down to being a middle-aged lady. I didn't really think about that much.
She had her vaccine, I think, in April, May 21. She rang me up the next morning and said, "I've gone blind," which I laughed, thinking she was joking. And she said, "Honestly, Mum, I can't see across the room." So I said, "Have you had a temperature?" So she said, "All night. I've changed my pyjamas twice and I still don't feel any better." And I said, "Well, take loads of paracetamol and just rest. It will wear off." We couldn't go and see her because it was during the time we couldn't go into people's houses. After a few days, she said it was better but very blurry. She just had like treble vision. And we went along with that, thinking that that would wear off. And we didn't see her until I think the middle of the summer, when she was allowed in our garden. And she came over for the day. She was sitting talking to her brother, and I looked at her and her face looked different one side. So I said to her, "Have you had Botox?" thinking that might cheer her up to have a bit of Botox. She said, "No, don't be silly." So she went and looked in the mirror and realised that her face was completely different each side. We didn't go into it anymore, we just left it at that. When she'd gone that evening, I said to her dad, "I'm really worried about that. She's either got something wrong with her face, like muscle spasms, or she's had a stroke." And then we just left it because she seemed to be okay. And then she started falling over and really hurting herself, falling down steps and stairs and things.
It was only when my mum said to me, "You should go and see your GP," and then they suggested that I go and see the neurologist, which turned out to be an 11-month wait. And in that time, my eyesight got worse, and also my legs, I could feel the numbness, the pain in my legs. That was about Christmas time. That's when I started to really go downhill. So my mum paid for me to go and see the neurologist that I was going to see in the NHS, to go privately.
And they said straight away she needed a brain scan. Well, she had the brain scan, and the next day the consultant rang her up and said, "Could you pop in?" She popped in, and we just thought he was going to say, "Well, the brain scan wasn't any good, you're going to have another one," because they don't usually come back to you that quick.
But he diagnosed me with having multiple sclerosis.
So when she rang and said that, I said, "Don't be ridiculous, of course you haven't. There's nothing wrong with you."
So multiple sclerosis is a chronic disease of the nervous system. What it does is it attacks the myelin sheath, which protects the nervous system, the nerves, and it eradicates it. It attacks everybody differently. So no two people are the same. Although there's 4 different types of multiple sclerosis, it's not always the same in everybody. There's relapsing remitting, which is what I've been diagnosed with. There's primary progressive, secondary progressive. I didn't really think that much of it at the time because obviously I was in quite a lot of pain and things were going wrong with me. I kept trying to work and I reduced my hours, and I was only seeing people that were important clients to me. But I knew that I was getting worse because I couldn't look into the mirror and then look into the hair and then look back into the mirror again. I was seeing double, which basically means that I was seeing the same thing out of each eye at the same time rather than seeing it together. That's when things started getting quite difficult for me. He also transferred me back to the NHS at the Chelsea and Westminster because he was the head of the department there. And also I was self-funding, which is quite expensive, it turns out.
And then she went on to have loads of tests everywhere. And then they said they wanted to do a spinal scan, and they said it definitely is. And the best treatment for that is enormous steroids. So she went into hospital and went on a steroid drip for 5 hours at a time.
Which actually did nothing, apart from give me a very bad come down. I had like 5 days of crying after each of them, but it didn't resolve any of my issues.
And then they waited 3 months. She seemed to rally a bit in that 3 months, so we thought, well, the steroids have got it. Then she went and had it done again, and after that she wasn't feeling well at all. Went to the consultant, they did some blood tests and sent her because her liver had stopped working. So they thought she was obviously drinking, which she wasn't. And when they did some tests, they said, no, she can't have steroids. So from there on, we started investigating what we could do for MS, because we didn't know anything about MS.
So then I was told that I was going to be put on they call it a DMT. And what this DMT does is it slows down the progression of the disease in your body. There's quite a lot of different types of medications that you can take. I was given the choice of 3 and I picked one that I thought would be most suitable to me. So then that started in November 22, so I had to wait nearly a year. And then I spent the next year having the monthly, the Tysabri infusions, which actually did nothing to me, not physically, and I could see that I was getting worse physically. I was tripping over a lot, I'd had to stop work. I was going downhill quite rapidly. I couldn't really see the point in keep taking drugs that weren't doing anything to me physically, because that's where the main problem was.
She wouldn't let me go to the hospital with her because she said I'm too argumentative, which is true. She eventually couldn't really walk properly, and then she started slurring her words so that she sounded as though she was a bit drunk. Her sentence would start off normal and it would disappear so that you couldn't hear her voice. So it was no good talking to her on the phone because she'd be talking and her voice would just disappear.
I had no sign of MS beforehand. I mean, to be honest, I felt a bit like a fake MSer because I had no symptoms, I had nothing. And when I see other people that have got MS and I see how difficult it's been for them to either get diagnosed, to work out what's wrong with them, because it's such a wide range of symptoms. Misdiagnosis is quite usual, I've seen, across all the other people that have got MS. So that's why I didn't feel like a typical MS sufferer, if you understand what I mean. So when I was going downhill, my symptoms were getting worse quite rapidly. I was looking for every single different type of anything that anyone could throw at me, whether it was what I was eating, the drugs I was taking, any exercise, anything like that, because I was quite fit beforehand. And I always ate well, so I couldn't see. I was reading all these books and looking at all these things. It was then that I saw this one guy that I have become quite friendly with, who had gone off to Mexico to have HSCT, which is stem cell surgery. So I then went on a bit of a journey, and so many different things, different angles, therapies, different reasons for this to work, because I couldn't see anything happening as far as the medication. I don't know, it was just a feeling that I had, and the more that I looked into it, the more I was willing to take a chance, because for me, the only option that I could see was either try this medication, try this HSCT, or, it sounds dramatic, but I was going to Switzerland and I was going to try Dignitas because I was getting worse, and my life had been quite full, quite rich. I'd been quite lucky to do everything that I'd wanted to do, and I just couldn't see a way out. So that's how comes I started looking into the HSCT. So after about probably nearly a year of taking the Tysabri, we had an appointment with my neurologist, and I took Mum with me because it's actually quite difficult to advocate for yourself when you're feeling pretty rubbish. And also I'm not very good at asking questions for myself, so Mum came along with me.
So she let me go and see her neurology consultant, and I thought she was a lovely young woman, about probably Victoria's age, and she explained how dangerous this was for Victoria, and that within 2 years she would be probably in a wheelchair and non-verbal. And Victoria obviously got upset. I didn't get upset, I was fine.
It actually quite upset me because I knew I was getting worse, and their answers were, well, you know, this is just how MS is. The problem is I had no symptoms prior to being diagnosed, and we'd already been looking at stuff, me and Mum had before, because I couldn't work out why I was going downhill so rapidly. So then Mum asked her, does she think the COVID vaccination triggered my MS? And she said yes, it did. I was vaccinated on April 21st, and I was diagnosed on November 21st. But that summer was when all my symptoms went downhill quite rapidly.
And I asked her, why can't Victoria have HSCT? And she said she wouldn't be eligible in this country, but we could go private in this country. So I said, could we have some names where we could investigate? I said to her, we've looked at Mexico and Russia. If you were Victoria, what would you do? And she said, I can't tell you as her consultant, but just as a friend, I can tell you I would go and have it done.
My mum, bless her, she really didn't want me to fly anywhere, which I do understand. And also, when we looked into the cost of the HSCT, you can get it in this country under the NHS, but you have to have 2 active lesions, and I only had 1, so I didn't qualify. So then we went down the private route, and I had appointments with a neurologist and a haematologist about having HSCT here. He again thought it would be a good idea too.
But he said the thing is they don't know enough about HSCT in this country because they haven't been doing it that long here. Whereas in Russia they've been doing it 17 years, Mexico 15. They seem to know more about how to treat it, but it isn't a cure. There is no cure for multiple sclerosis at the moment. But he said if she had HSCT and it slowed everything down, she might get another 15 or 20 years before it gets worse, and in that time there might be a cure.
When we looked at it, the price was 95 grand here, which was quite a lot of money, but when your health comes into question, you don't question money. Money's not important. We were told that it was going to happen in the September. It just didn't, I don't know what happened, but the energy just didn't flow. Whether it was the fact that I put my MS trigger down to the COVID vaccination, I don't know whether that frightened people off. I'm not sure, it just wasn't flowing.
It was very expensive and I was very disappointed because although you pay all that money, they don't even get back to you. You have to chase them to find out what they're thinking. So I kind of thought that they were a bit rubbish.
I think Mum started to lose patience because she could see that I was going downhill quite rapidly. And on my birthday, I still hadn't heard anything, and my mum's just like, sod it, go to Mexico. So I applied to Mexico, and I got a reply back within a week, and they said, yep, come in January 24.
So that's how come we decided, yes, we would do that. And Victoria said if she doesn't do that, then she would go to Switzerland. She said, I am not being in a wheelchair. And I didn't want that, so
that was quite good actually, because that was like, I felt like it was a huge weight off my shoulders. I could then go and explore more about Mexico, more about the medication, more about what was going to happen. Obviously the price wasn't as expensive as here. It was only 65 grand. I felt that something was right in my stomach, and they were just brilliant, Mexico. They got back to me straight away.
Every time she emailed them, they either rang her or got back to her straight away, and it kind of gave you comfort that they seemed to know what they were doing. And I watched every video I could find, and everybody just praised them.
Then I had to have a 3-month washout of the drugs that I was taking, just to make sure that I was completely clean by the time that I got to Mexico. 65 grand was a bit of a panic. Not panic, but it was a bit of a weight, really. Bless Mum and Dad started looking into remortgaging the house, which I really, really didn't want to do.
So I had a couple of people round to sort out financing it. But to take money out of the house, it's like you pay back 3 times the amount you borrow.
I didn't want that put on them. I mean, my dad's at 84 now. My mum's, not that far behind, but it's too much pressure. Luckily, a friend of mine stepped in because he got wind of what was going on, and he just said to me, there's absolutely no way your parents are paying for you. So then he stepped in and was like, right, I'm going to do a fundraiser. So he pulled together, so it was Rob Starr, Dave Harvey, and we pulled together Becky B, who's done a fundraiser for Grenfell. And the 3 of them organised my fundraiser. I mean, gosh, they completely took it out of my hands, which was 1, difficult for me, but 2, very nice. They held a party at Rob's pub in Liverpool Street. They held a fundraiser, which I had unbelievable amounts of kindness from people offering Airbnbs to pictures to all sorts of collaborations, all sorts of things that came on board. I mean, I can't even tell you the amount of press that was given to me. Really phenomenal.
Becky rang and said, would we go? Because Victoria obviously couldn't go because she was already isolating. And because she felt the quicker she got there, the better it would be for her. Less damage to her brain, because at any stage it could go back and attack her brain again. We went to the fundraising, which was amazing. Mostly, I think, because everybody had been locked in during lockdown and all her friends hadn't seen each other. So it was like this massive party. We went in this pub and it was all kitted out. There was different rooms that people could hire, and all her friends were coming in. And luckily, Becca was around, who I know quite well. And I was saying to Becca, who's that person? She goes, I have no idea at all. She said, but if Victoria was sitting here, she could tell you everybody that comes through the door. She would know everybody. They were all dressed in T-shirts. All the girls were dressed in T-shirts. And they'd all got buckets. And they'd all got photographs of Victoria on. Dance for drama. And they were going around really wouldn't let people get past till they put some money in the bucket. And then they were saying, I don't carry money, I've only got my card. And they were going, that's okay. And giving them a card reader. In that day, they managed to raise the whole amount, which is absolutely amazing. I couldn't imagine anybody raising that much money.
Lo and behold, they raised 64 grand, which is unbelievable. It's exactly what I needed.
It was a really good day, but I couldn't stay there long. I got too upset.
Wow. I don't even know what to say. I've got no words. There is absolutely no way I ever thought that I'd pull together 64 grand. It's the weirdest thing knowing that the fundraiser is going on and you're at home, because I wasn't well enough to attend it. I think it was quite an overwhelming event because Mum and Dad went.
Anyway, we came home and we got on with isolating. So Victoria was kind of isolating in her own flat at the time, but which was silly because she was on her own and there was only her and the dog couldn't go out because she couldn't see anybody. So they came and lived here, and we kind of got used to living together again, which was quite difficult because your mid-50s daughter does not want to be told off by her mother. Benny had to get used to a new routine, but it was good that he stayed here because then when Victoria went away, it wasn't so stressful for him because the morning she went, we took him for his normal walk. So when he came back, she just wasn't here. And after a couple of days, he just fitted in with my dogs and he was fine.
My dog, he's a rescue. I got him just after the first lockdown because the woman who was his owner had a heart attack and a stroke and then caught COVID in hospital. This was prior to the first lockdown. And when she came out, when we could, there was 9 dogs that needed rehoming. So my mum got 2, I got him. So yeah, then the next thing was, how was I going to get to Mexico?
So we said, right, that's what we'll do, and I'll come with you to look after you. And she went, no, you will not come with me. Who's going to look after Dad? And Benny. She wasn't worried about my 2 dogs, but who was going to look after Benny?
I kind of put Mum off because I really needed her to stay here and look after my dog. And my best friend, I asked him and he stepped in. Luckily, he's a tour manager, so he's used to getting on and off flights.
Johnny said he would fly with her to take her there, so she didn't have to fly on her own. So we said we would pay for Johnny to fly over there with her.
So he agreed to come with me to Mexico, which I really needed. I didn't realise quite how mentally taxing it would be going through airports. We had a bit of a slightly crazy journey there because the volcano erupted and I couldn't fly into Puebla, so I flew into Mexico City. So Jock had to put me in a taxi and I went down to Puebla, which was about 2.5 hours in the car. I left Johnny in Mexico because he had to fly straight back. And then I got to the core building. I completely knew when I walked in there that I had definitely made the right choice. They were so caring and looked after me so well. I met my carer, Lucio, who was an absolute delight and a godsend. His first words to me were, think of me as your bodyguard, I'm going to do everything. Again, this is such a weird place for me to be in because I'm not used to giving over responsibility to other people. But actually, it was so nice to do this. It was just so nice to just give up yourself and allow everybody to do their job because they know what's needed and what help I needed. Luckily, Lucio has done 16 of these treatments before, so I felt like I was in good hands. He was medically trained, he's part of the team, and he knows them all incredibly well, so I felt really comfortable and quite relaxed.
It was the best choice she made, really, because the chap that actually looked after her in Mexico was amazing. And he told her so much that she needed to know for when she came back, that if I'd have gone, for a start, I wouldn't have understood Spanish. I wouldn't have understood the technology. I wouldn't have understood about making her appointments. I wouldn't know what treatment she was on, to how it would affect her. Whereas he told her every day, tomorrow you are having this, you will feel like this. And she said everything he said was correct.
So the first couple of days that I was there, because you're split into groups, you can have up to 20 people being seen at that month. The nice thing about the core building is they've got a really beautiful terrace which overlooks the volcano. And what I didn't realise was how lucky I was to meet other people with MS who are all going through the same treatment at the same time. I ended up going and having my treatment, my stem cell treatment, with 2 other women who I've kept in touch with, actually. It's been quite nice to have other people around. Once we got split into groups, then every day I had to go and have an injection. And what this injection does is it releases your stem cells into your blood. So every day I see the doctors and the nurse, they test my blood pressure, my weight, all these little tests are done every single day so they can keep track. Lucio kept track of it. And then I started with my chemo. So I had to have 3 rounds of chemo. The chemo was 10 hours, so it was split into 2 days. So we had 5 hours one day and then 5 hours the next day. I think I was quite fortunate. I didn't get sick when I was having the chemo. I mean, you're quite low, but actually, just to be able to go and sleep and rest and not have to think about anything is such a nice position to be in. So I had 2 lots of chemo, and in that time I shaved my hair, which we have to do. It's part of health and safety, and because your hair will start to fall out, so they rather you just shave it all off beforehand. Then I had to go to have my stem cells harvested. So you have 1 lot of chemo, gets your body ready. Then you have the stem cells are harvested. So you have about 2.5 hours, I think mine was, of your blood being taken out and your stems being taken away, and then they go off to be regrown again. A day later, I had the stem cells put back in again, the new ones, because the old ones were gone. I had 111 million stems put back in, and then I had another chemo, and then I had the catheter taken out. I mean, it's only in there for a couple of days. It's a little bit uncomfortable, but it just makes the whole operation a lot easier rather than having an intravenously. So it was after that my hair started to fall out. I'd already shaved it, so for me it wasn't distressing at all because I'd already taken the big step. Weirdly, when I came round from having my PICC line first put in, I took a selfie of myself, and that's the last time I had to shut one eye to focus. I didn't realise it at the time. It was only when I looked back after a couple of days, I couldn't work out. All of a sudden, I didn't even really notice, but all of a sudden my eyesight was back to normal. And when I asked my carer why, he said that would have been the chemotherapy had done that. It was too early for the stem cells, which is, again, it's slightly frustrating for me because I feel like that could have been picked up in the UK, but it wasn't. After my chemo was finished, I just came back to the core building and rested. The amount of water that I had to uptake, I was drinking about 1.5 bottles a day, and the doctors advised me there to drink up to 3 to 4 bottles of water a day, which actually is great because it really flushes your system out. But I was going to the toilet about every 15 minutes, which was, God, it was quite irritating. When I had the injections for the stem cells, you realise how painful it is, and actually having the water of flushing it out makes such a huge difference.
And then she started getting violent headaches, and she said it was worse than a migraine. And he said, "You're not drinking enough." So he set his alarm for every 2 hours, and every 2 hours he got up day or night and gave her a glass of water. So I wouldn't have been able to do that. So it was well worth having him look after her. I didn't hassle Victoria very much while she was in Mexico because I thought, I read how tiring it is and, you know, how you just want to be left alone most of the time. And I knew she'd want to talk to all her girlfriends, so I didn't hassle her much. Our work started when she came home.
I had my stem cells put back in and had the last chemo. And then after that, you have more injections to get your stem cells back into the bone marrow, and also you're pumped full of drugs to get you home, really, because obviously your immunity has been taken right down to 0. So they need to make sure that your bloods are up again and that you're ready to leave Mexico. Unfortunately, my bloods were quite laid back. Hello. So I'm not leaving today. Guess what? Surprise, surprise. My bloods are too laid back and they're not at the right levels yet. So I'm not leaving this evening. They didn't get up to the right number to leave. Everybody else left on the Saturday. And my bloods didn't come back up till the Wednesday. So in that time I had a real frantic trying to reschedule the flights coming home. Thankfully, my family stepped in, my brother helped me, because it's actually really difficult trying to do this from Mexico on your own. And also, even though I had a doctor's note, they were trying to take £4,000 off of me, which is very irritating, considering that it wasn't my fault, it was the It was down to medical reasons that I couldn't leave. Luckily my brother stepped in and sorted it out, so we managed to get about £1,000 knocked off, so it wasn't as astronomical but still not great. Eventually we got our flight sorted, so I was flying out on the Thursday. My brother came and got me and brought me back to my mum's house where I had to isolate. They say they give you a 2 to 3 months isolation, but my carer asked if I would take 3 months. Because I was coming back in winter as well, and there's a lot of germs around, he just said, just do this for the time being. He thinks 3 months is the perfect time to do this. So then that brought me back to living with my mum and dad for 3 months, which was quite interesting because I don't think I realised, I didn't really think past Mexico.
It was a bit of a shock when Victoria came home from Mexico. When she first came home, she was so healthy and bubbly and back to being her. And then, as days went by, say 2 weeks, she went from there down to there and hit rock bottom. We sort of got into her care, which was far more difficult than I expected.
It was a challenge. The fact that I couldn't do anything for myself, because obviously we had to be extremely careful of any germs, anything coming in the house. I couldn't sleep with my dog. I couldn't hang out with him. If I did, I had to make sure that I washed my hands.
It was difficult with the dogs, trying to get the dogs away from her. You know, I've always had dogs, so I don't think of them as germ carriers. But that was one of the things, she was not allowed near an animal.
I couldn't eat certain things. I had 6 months of food restrictions, and so everything had to be really, really cooked beforehand. It's almost like being a baby. That's the only thing that I can liken it to. There's lots of things were off menu. I call them live, things like sushi, things like blue cheese.
I found cooking difficult. I had to really think about what we were going to eat, because I wasn't going to cook separately for Victoria, so we were all going to eat the same. You had to buy everything fresh and cook from scratch. You couldn't have takeaways. It was extremely difficult till I got my head round the fact that she explained to me that her stem cells are like newborn babies' stem cells. And you wouldn't feed a newborn baby eggs, you wouldn't give them cheese. And if you just have to remember that you're feeding a newborn baby, although it's in a large person's body. I did miss using my microwave and fast cooking and things, but we got round that.
I wasn't allowed any self-service. I did forget one time and I went into Tesco's and got a pick and mix, and I was really sick. That kind of made me really sort of pick up again, because things hadn't sort of slackened off, but I think I'd sort of slackened off. I just forgot that I wasn't allowed to do certain things.
If we went out, we couldn't wear our clothes back indoors. We had to get changed in the garage and remember to leave dressing gowns in the garage and come in. Changing her sheets every day was difficult because it was winter and it was trying to get everything dry. Keeping the dogs out of her room, but of course Benny had to see her, so she had to mask up to see Benny, put an old dressing gown on so that he could come and say hello to her, then take the dressing gown off before she went back in her room so she didn't take any germs in her room with her.
It was quite weird coming back, and although I could see him, his whole demeanour had changed. He'd sort of become very loyal to my mum, which I was pleased about because obviously I couldn't do anything for him. But it was very weird space to be in, where you see your dog and he just walks past you. I mean, he was happy to see me back.
Hey! Oh my word! Come you?
But I think once I was sort of back,
Look at you!
kind of lost interest pretty quickly.
We trudged along fine for about the first 5 weeks, and she completely stayed in her room. Luckily, she used the downstairs bathroom and we used the upstairs bathroom. Nobody came near her at all. The only person that went in her room was me to clean every day. And then she eventually came out of her room and she was a bit steadier on her feet then. And she was coming along, but she'd have good days and bad days. Some days she'd just want to be on her own with the door shut. And then eventually she would start getting dressed and coming out of her room. But she ate in her room on her own. And she seemed to get on fine. And then she started coming to sit in the back garden as the weather cheered up a bit.
So my isolation here was interesting, quite interesting being with your parents again at 55. I'm so grateful because there's absolutely no way I could have done this on my own at home. I didn't realise how useless I was. It's things like making food. I went out for a walk a few times, which was great because you can see the difference in my walking ability between how I used to be and how I am now. But you don't realise quite how exhausted you're going to feel after all this. I mean, HSCT is quite a huge undertaking for your body because what you do is you completely remove your immunity and put it back in again. And I don't think I had any idea of the enormity of it.
She started getting better, and then she started wanting to try and walk the dog. So we started just walking to the end of the road and back, and then she would come back in and sleep for hours. That was just enough. She couldn't do any more. But by the time she left here, she was actually walking around the block, and she didn't ever have to put her walking stick down. She was carrying it just to make sure she'd got it in case she needed it. And she was talking normally. So it looks like it may be working, which I definitely hope it is.
It was really lovely. Spend time with my parents, but also quite frustrating as well at the same time because you realise how much you have you're in your own way of doing things and they're in their own way of doing things. So let's say as sick as I was, but I was quite down as in unable to do things for myself, not down as in mentally down. But it was quite a challenge for me. Quite a challenge to be a 55-year-old woman and again still give up complete your own power to let other people help you because you actually can't do things for yourself.
And the summer started coming and she started getting brighter, and I knew she said she was going to stay here till August, but she lasted till June. And then she wanted to go home. And she decided to have her place redecorated so that everything there was spotlessly clean. And we went and fitted it all out and cleaned it up for her. And eventually she went home, which was more stressful than having her here, really, because she still needed her sheets changed at least 3 times a week. So I would have to go to Earl's Court because she couldn't do it herself, because if she changed her bed, she was too tired to remake it.
Then I went back to London after 3 months and kind of had to re-establish my life with my dog, which was fine actually. He just needed to switch allegiance back again and just doing things for myself. My mum still came up every week and got my washing for me.
But luckily, before she went away, I talked her into getting onto Chelsea and Westminster Council to ask them, is there any way I could park my car in her road? Because you have to be a resident and it's resident only, and the traffic wardens around there are there all the time. And we were parking in the big Tesco store, paying to park there, and then walking up the Cromwell Road, which was quite dangerous. And I didn't want to do it late at night on my own. If she called me and said, Mum, you've got to come, I didn't want to have to park there and walk all the way down there on my own. And Westminster Council were amazing. They gave me a parking permit that I can park in her road, and they also gave her a disability badge so that she can use that in anybody's car that's chauffeuring her around because she can't get on London Transport yet.
But my energy, that's the thing that I've really noticed, is taken a lot longer than again, it's one thing that I didn't even think about really, but how much your energy and your fatigue, things like this are called into question because you have to pace yourself. I mean, realistically, I'm only 8.5 months old since I had my stem cell surgery. So you wouldn't actually treat an 8-month-old baby in the way that I treat myself as a 55-year-old woman. So I've had to wind things back in again and just slow down so much and just be more restful and slow the pace down. The one thing that I've been extremely grateful for the whole time that I've had this, I've had a counsellor, and that's been unbelievable. Just having somebody to talk to, because not only is your physical self going through a complete transformation, but your mental self is as well. And even though in my head I want to do all the things that I used to do physically, I still can't do those yet. That's the next step in getting well, is I'm having vestibular therapy, which deals with all my neurological, like my balance, my fatigue. So my vision, even though when I look straight ahead I can see, this is fine. When I look to the right and all the way around. But if I look to the left fast, for about 3 seconds I get double vision, and then it levels back out and it's normal again. But what I can't do is turn my head really fast up and down because it's too fuzzy. So there's little things like that that the vestibular therapist is dealing with at the moment. She reckons probably about 3 to 6 months of doing these exercises continuously before I can then go and get a personal trainer, which I will do, but I need to sort this neurological issues out first.
As a mum, it's very difficult because you can't show that it's upsetting you, and you have to be strong and joke and tease her about having her hair chopped. She had the most beautiful hair, and first of all she had it chopped to shoulder length so she could send it to a charity, which I thought was a great idea rather than just chop it off and throw it away. And actually I liked her bald when it was shaved off completely. She's got a lovely head, and I just thought it was rather attractive. I thought, well, I'd keep mine like that if I could get away with it. I find it difficult with other people that don't understand. Well, I didn't understand MS, I didn't understand HSCT, and other people say, oh, she's just been dramatic, for God's sake, she's fine really. Well, if you see her and you just talk to her, or you talk to her on the phone, you think, yes, she is fine. But when you're with her, you know her limitations now. I never knew anything about multiple sclerosis. I never knew how it affects people. But the thing it does teach you is to be more tolerant to other people when you're out. It makes you very aware of how vulnerable people are that have problems.
So my walking beforehand, I mean, this is how I knew I was really gone downhill, was I couldn't even walk to the end of my road. I'd got a walking stick, but as time went on, we're talking about a matter of about a year, how bad and how rapidly I went downhill. I couldn't walk to the end of the road without using a walking stick. I couldn't step off the pavement because of my double vision. I couldn't wear glasses. I couldn't wear contact lenses because it made everything quite trippy, like quite, you couldn't put any distinction in place. The unbelievable thing is, coming out of Mexico, I could actually walk from one end of the road to the other, which I couldn't do beforehand without my walking stick. Now, that's not to say that my walking stick is completely gone. I walk my dog twice a day without my walking stick, and I do that to help me and to build up strength and build up, because you don't realise how anxious and how nervous you can be. Because I've been in such a bubble for such a time, for a couple of years, just even walking down the road can be quite stressful. So twice a day I go out and I walk him, and then the rest of the time I'm with my walking stick. I take my walking stick because I get tired. I know it's not going to be like this forever, but also because I look fine, people, when they look at me, they can't see that I have trouble with my eyesight, or I have trouble with like my fatigue or my balance. So if I take my walking stick, A, it's something for me to lean on if I do get tired, but B, also wards people off as well. It's kind of like a warning sign without me going around mouthing it off, you know. So my advice for other people with MS: when I see how difficult life has for other people that have gone through this, and their diagnosis and their struggle with the medical teams, as helpful as they are, I would never take that away from them, but you're the one that's living with the MS. It's very difficult to explain to somebody that hasn't got MS when they're sitting there opposite you how much pain you feel in your hands, how much pain you feel in your legs. I got really thin. I couldn't be bothered to eat. It was such a massive thing for me to take on that suddenly in my 50s that I was diagnosed with MS. I think my resignation of accepting that has to do with me. I couldn't accept that I had got MS, but also the not very nice fact that it was the COVID vaccination that had triggered it, which made it quite hard for me to swallow both things at the same time.
I always said from the start that my daughter couldn't possibly have multiple sclerosis. I would have known. And that she was fine until she had the vaccine. When her problems started with the eyesight and the falling over, at first I thought she'd got vertigo, because I suffer with vertigo and I know how disabling that can be. But it was clear it wasn't that. And they just kept saying, no, it was just multiple sclerosis. And I kept saying to her, you were fine till you had the vaccine, Victoria. Do not have any more vaccine. She's not anti-vaccine. She wanted to have the vaccine because she works in London and would be on London transport all the time. So I said to her, please can I ask your consultant, do they think it was the vaccine? And she said, no, you mustn't say that, because you will put their back up. They will think you're trying to blame them. I wasn't trying to blame anybody. I just wanted the truth. And actually, he said straight away, I'm afraid it is. He explained that some people have really good immune system, which we've always thought Victoria has, because she's never ill. She doesn't catch cold. She's never sick. She's never off work. And he said, the vaccine is given to you to teach your immune system that if you catch COVID, this is what it looks like, and you attack it. Well, he said, unfortunately, her immune system was so good, it attacked the vaccine, which was what it was supposed to do, but then it didn't switch off. And then it carries on then, and it attacks everything in your brain. Your nerves in your brain have this fatty cell around them to protect them, so that if you bang your head or anything, you don't damage your nerves. When your immune system goes into overdrive, it actually eats through this fatty, I think he called it myelin or something. It eats through it, and then it attacks the nerves in your brain. Once that's been broken, it cannot be repaired.
It was obviously very upsetting for me at the time, because this just wasn't something I really wanted to hear, because obviously I'd been quite an advocate of having the vaccinations. I think it definitely triggered the MS that was in me. Maybe it was something that was lying underneath the surface.
So that helped me understand what was going on, because unfortunately people who have multiple sclerosis, normally it grows over the years. The damage takes years and years and years before they can have it, 40 years before they even know that they've got it. He said, but because her immune system went into overdrive, she's gone from 0 to where she is now. So I said, well, I don't understand how you measure it. And he said, well, it goes from 0 to 10. So I said, well, where's Victoria? And he said, about 7. So me thinking 10 was good and you were going that way, he said, no, it's 0 is good, 10 you're dead. And I said, well, how come she's gone to 7 straight away? And he said, because hers is progressing very fast. He said, you need to do something quickly. If you want to, you've probably got 18 months to 2 years to try and do something. If you don't do it in that time, you will have gone too far and there won't be anything.
After having the HSCT, which basically removes everything inside your body, which was one of the reasons why I decided to go for it, because I wanted the COVID vaccination stopped. Whatever it was doing, whatever it had triggered, wherever it was going in my body, I knew that it was travelling through me quite rapidly. I've talked to people about this. I talked to Lucia about this because obviously you're supposed to have your childhood vaccinations again. You can do a test after a year to see if your body's retained any. But also I do know that if it was the COVID vaccination that triggered my MS, I don't really want to spend time having vaccinations again that could very much re-trigger it again. So I've made the decision myself, I'm not having any vaccinations. I'm happy with where I'm at now. Life was going downhill for me, and what I don't want to do is have any more vaccinations that could potentially trigger something and send me back, my health back downhill again.
If we go back 3 years, I would say I wouldn't have let Victoria try and sort this out on her own. I would have interfered earlier, because she's always been fiercely independent and always wanted to do it her way. I let her just go for her appointments and do everything on her own, or take a friend with her, and I didn't interfere. I just said yes to everything. But then when nothing seemed to be working, I thought it was time I interfered. When I found out what was really going on, then I knew it was time I stepped up and tried to sort things out. I was against at HSCT at first. I said, no, I don't want you to do it. Her dad was completely against it, even when she went. But we couldn't see any other option. Although we didn't want her to have it done, we thought HSCT was too much of a risk, especially as we have a close friend, and he started very similar treatment and he couldn't do it. And it killed him. And you kind of think, supposing it goes wrong, she could be worse off than what she was. At least now she's coming out of it a bit. She's getting back to herself, whereas we could have lost her. It is difficult with an older child trying to look after them, because obviously in her home she does things her way, and in my home I do things my way. And the same when they come back. You've got to be gentle with them, because they're really struggling themselves. I mean, for me, it was a shock when I saw her, because she didn't look like her. And I should imagine for the person themselves, it's a shock when you look in the mirror and you don't look anything like yourself. But you do learn to help each other. You know, she was very kind with us, because she knew sometimes I was struggling or her dad was struggling. It is difficult. It's a lot harder than I thought it would be. I didn't realise how careful we'd have to be when she came back. We carried on wearing masks long after everybody else. We did still go up our clubs, but we changed when we came back, which was great fun. 10 o'clock at night, stripping off in the garage. It was like being teenagers again. But it is difficult. I wouldn't say to anybody that it's easy, because it's not. And hopefully we're still friends. And also, I just can't see how it's beneficial to our country and the NHS to treat people on a drug that is not beneficiary to them at all, not doing anything for them, that's costing a fortune to give them this drug, when they could give them the one-off treatment that could set them in remission for years. I can't see the maths. I mean, she did her homework, so she knew what she was letting herself in for. Fortunately, we didn't. Otherwise, we probably would have had a big no-no. It's her life and it's her choice. And we just have to go along with it.
So my life as somebody with multiple sclerosis has really turned things on their head. I'm extremely grateful for my best friend, who has been through everything with me. She was somebody that got diagnosed with having MS 20 years ago, but has had no medication. But without her, I don't know where I'd be. I read Professor Burt's book, Everyday Miracles. He was the first person to discover HSCT. My friend Scott, he was the person that sent me the brochure. He's definitely somebody that I have been extremely grateful to have his friendship for. Shift MS, which is an MS site that's on Instagram that you can log on to, and every week they have somebody that's got MS and they take you for the weekend, and so you can see a little insight into what their lives are like, and you can also ask some questions. That's been pretty invaluable. The AIMS charity, which have been amazing. I've had a couple of peer calls with James, who set the charity up. I didn't know this before. I got him as somebody to talk to, but he had HSCT and he set the charity up because he was so enamoured with how he's been doing and how he's seen other people doing, and he wants to spread the knowledge and give people help, because it's not a traditional treatment. At the moment they're doing a STAR trial, which you'll get the data from the DMTs and you'll get the data from the HSCT, and they'll put them together and see which works better. So for me, it's been quite difficult to share this journey, not the actual process itself, but the admittance of that it was the COVID vaccination that triggered it, and that my health has gone downhill quite seriously in the last couple of years. But the really wonderful thing has been that my nephew has decided to make this documentary, because I really wanted to tell my story and wanted to get it across. And so they've stepped in to help me explain exactly what I've been through and exactly where I'm at. Hello. It's been quite a long time since I've been visible, really, but I need some help. I have been served, well, the whole building has been served notice, and I have to move out in a month's time, which is a very short amount of time to make a life-changing decision, but push comes to shove, and I've decided to throw the towel in on London, because I don't use it at the moment. I get very panicky if I have to walk down a high street. So I have decided to relocate for the time being to Margate, hopefully. Not what I wanted. I didn't want to throw the towel in on London, but my health is more important. And this recovery from HSCT is a long time. You know, I'm a hell of a lot better. I can see directly, but I have trouble changing directions, and my balance and my fatigue, that all needs to improve, and it's a very slow process. And thank God I've got my dog, because he's my therapy dog. He's wandering around here at the moment. But something that I can be close to friends, something that I think that the sea air will do me the world of good for getting better. London panics me at the moment, which is not great. I need a slower pace of life, so I need some help. Hello. It's my first birthday today, my first stem cell birthday. I thought I'd let you all have a laugh at my hair. And I'm okay. There's a few things that are still out of kilter, but I'm so much better than I was a year ago. And I've got this new crazy curly hairdo to deal with. So yeah, I'm good. I'm not out of the woods yet, but a hell of a lot better. I'm very, very grateful to the fundraiser for getting me to Mexico, because without that I was going downhill quite drastically, quite rapidly. So big thank you to everybody, and to let you know that I'm here and I'm okay. I'm in Margate, newly moved. Hopefully that sea air will help as well. So I'll speak to you all soon.
Slater?
Scene 1, shot 1, take 1.
And you're...
Should I pause a second, let Benny out?
Yeah, I think he does.
Come up here.
Just come and sit here. But I put it down to being a middle-aged lady. I didn't really...
In the middle of the summer when she was allowed in our garden, and she came over for the day.
Camera B rolling, roll sound.
Sound speed.
Help me.